It's the origin of one of the most beloved persons of all time, a disgruntled elf, and a businessman. We're talking Santa Claus the movie. Hit it. It was 1985. The Color Purple premiered in New York. A polar vortex left the eastern U.S. with record low temperatures. Boris Becker became the youngest Wimbledon champion, and David Huddleston warmed our hearts as Santa Claus. I'm your host, Jerry D., with another episode of Totally Rad Christmas, the podcast that talks all things Christmas in the 80s. Toys, movies, specials, music, and fads. If it was gnarly during Christmas in the 80s, we got it covered. Now, joining me are two very special guests. You'll know them as the hosts of the Way Tubular Santa by the Minute podcast, John and Ben. Guys, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
You know, I'm doing all right. It has been kind of a day, but getting to talk with y'all already makes me feel better. So
yeah, we're pretty excited to be here.
Yeah, this is the first time that we're appearing on another podcast.
Oh, right on. Well, thank you for coming on, and I'm so glad it's mine. So hopefully we'll just have a lot of fun here.
Hope so. I'm sure we will.
So before we get into it, I have to ask, what made you guys want to start a podcast about Santa Claus the movie?
Well, you want to take this one?
You go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Well, it's your favorite Christmas movie.
It is. I grew up watching this movie. Yeah. I was only 3 when it came out. Okay. So every year I watched this on a VHS that my parents recorded off from I don't even know what, it had commercials and everything. Nice. And that's how I grew up watching it. And then finally it showed up, in stores for you to buy. Mm-hmm. And then when I met John, I showed it to him. And
well, up to this point, anytime you mention Santa Claus the movie to anyone, they go, "Oh, the Tim Allen one."
Tim Allen,
yeah.
Yep.
And she'd go, "No, not Tim Allen. It's the other one, with the elf and the John Lithgow and everything." But it's like, "Oh yeah, I'd heard of that movie," and it's become a Christmas tradition. And every Christmas season, we talk about this movie way too much.
Way too much.
So then I fell down this rabbit hole of the podcast genre of movies by minute. Mm-hmm. I heard about these guys who do Star Wars Minute.
Yeah.
I'd only heard about it. I'd never listened to an episode. And I go, wouldn't it be funny if we just did a podcast where we broke down Santa Claus, the movie, minute by minute? And then I found moviesbyminutes.com, and it's like, holy smokes, there's hundreds of movies. You name a movie, there's a podcast about it. But luckily, no one had been covering Santa Claus the movie yet, so we were in luck.
It's funny because I remember seeing this in the theaters. I was 5 when this came out, and it kind of disappeared from the public culture. From culture, it's just it's not really out there. And then all of a sudden, like you said, I remember seeing it on DVD and Blu-ray at Target, and I was like, oh yeah, I love that movie. So it was one of those that I'd completely forgotten about just because I didn't have a recording available. But I remember, watching it in the theater, and it was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, neither one of us actually saw it in the theater when it came out. It was one of those things you discovered on TV as a kid, mm-hmm. or on VHS. You rented it at the video store. It seemed to be always there every year at Christmas, on TBS or something like that. Mm-hmm. But, last December, a theater in our state, we're in Maine, had a showing in December. They had a cult classics type thing. Mm-hmm. And it's okay, it was on a random Thursday night. I was even working a night shift that night, but it's okay, we got to make this work. and we finally saw Santa Claus the movie. It may have been 30 years too late, but we finally saw it on the big screen.
I think it was perfect because now it's ingrained into my head. If I saw it way back then, I wouldn't have remembered.
You wouldn't have remembered, yeah.
No,
well, exactly, and I'm proof of that. I remember seeing it, and I remember for the longest time when I thought of Santa Claus, I thought of David Huddleston. Mm-hmm. He was like the guy, and then the other movies started coming out, and it's just one of those things that eventually it kind of faded away because, like I said, it wasn't in the public eye, and it's a shame because it's a really cute, adorable, just, like warm and fuzzy kind of movie, Well, you guys know,
sure.
You started a podcast about it.
David Huddleston should have gotten an Oscar for that performance, because you watch it and it's like, you don't even think it's an actor. It's like, oh, that's just Santa.
Yes, exactly.
That's how good he is.
He really is. I mean, he looks the part, but he also, he really just embodies that, that loving spirit that you think of when you think of Santa Claus. He's everything that you imagine. And I think for a lot of kids, I mean, I know some of the people in like London, especially, in England, they really love this one, and David Huddleston is like their guy. And so for a lot of people, that's their Santa.
Mm-hmm. He's my Santa.
Yeah. Hashtag that's my Santa.
That's right.
I dig it. Yeah. So like I said, I remember seeing this in the theater, and I remember also that McDonald's had a tie-in with it. I think they had like some toys in their Happy Meals and maybe some books. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, they had these little plush reindeer that you could get if you bought like a book of gift certificates. But they had like coloring books and storybooks in the actual Happy Meal. Somewhere around here, we actually have the original Happy Meal boxes. We got them off of eBay.
We do.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
There were two separate ones, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there were two separate ones, and we have both of them unused,
Wow. That's cool. I mean, I didn't have, I remember I wanted the ornament because it was a little ornament, right? The plush that you talking about?
The little reindeer, yeah.
I wanted it and I never got it, but I did get the books, the coloring books. And I remember loving those things until, something else came around, like Thundercats or something. I don't know. But I remember I wanted one, and I looked it up like a couple of years ago. And I mean, they were not too expensive, but they were a little more than I thought. And I mean, it's one of those that it's like, okay, I'm going to snatch this up right now. so now, we put it out when we can every Christmas.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of merchandise for this movie. There were like kids' books and storybooks, and we have like a couple promotional items. We have the original poster hanging on the wall back here, the theatrical poster. We have like a press kit that they sent out to news stations at the time, like, oh, here's some clips from Santa Claus the movie, and like, here's about the actors and stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there wasn't a lot of merchandise made, which is really unusual for a movie that was so big budget, Mm-hmm. It wasn't until years later, because we were both kids at the time, it wasn't until years later, it's like, oh, wow, this was like really considered like a bomb at the time, and critics just tore it apart. Yeah. But it's like, how could, like, but you walking through a kid's eyes, it's like,
this is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. For real. It was super rad. It was just one of those things that you're like, Santa, and you find out everything, like how it's made and how he did it. And so, I mean, it was like so cool because it answered so many questions, Mm-hmm. But do you think maybe because there wasn't very much promotion, because they were trying to like build Dudley Moore, like maybe it was more of a Dudley Moore kind of vehicle rather than an actual like Santa Claus movie?
Yeah, definitely. That's something we've really dived into on the movie. It's like on the podcast rather, how this movie was like built around Dudley Moore. Like the whole gimmick was, hey, this guy that he's kind of short, he's playing an elf.
Yeah.
They paid him $5 million to be in this movie.
Wow.
Even before they had a script finished, they had Dudley Moore on board because he was like the big selling point, because he's very much in demand at this time. He was like at his peak, like right after like movies like Arthur. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And movies like that. So this was a huge deal. So they dumped a lot of money into this movie. But it's funny, Dudley Moore doesn't really make much of an impact in this movie. It's Huddleston and John Lithgow.
Yeah.
John Lithgow stole the movie,
Yeah, there are bite marks, in the film print from all the scenery he's chewing. But he does it great. I mean, I loved it. It's a great performance. And, it's funny that you mentioned that because it was the Salkinds, right, that produced it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alexander Skeleton and his son Ilya, they produced the Superman movies.
Right.
And the Superman movies were starting to lose steam, and they also had to pay royalties to Warner Brothers and DC for the rights to Superman. Mm-hmm. So they were like, well, let's build our own big budget superhero that we don't have to pay any royalties for. And they landed on Santa Claus.
I mean, he's a hero.
Yeah.
He is when I was a kid, he's definitely my hero.
Yeah.
It's like on paper, like this is going to work. We're going to make Santa Claus movies forever, but it just didn't turn out that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do love the movie, and we'll get into the plot in a little bit, but it's almost like it's two separate movies. There's like the first part, which is like amazing. And then there's the second part, which is like set, more in the 80s, and it's real contemporary. And I mean, it takes like a huge, just tonal shift there.
Yes, which definitely.
It's a bit jarring. I mean, watching it now as a kid, I didn't even think twice about it. It was like, yeah, okay, this is cool. But we were talking about the Salkinds, and when I did my Superman episode, I remember, doing some research, and they were notorious for like being very dubious with their payments. Have you discovered if any of that happened on this movie? Because it was where like they would make their payments on their checks, and it was like a certain check with certain numbers missing, and so like you had to like go to a certain bank to get it done, and essentially they were just buying themselves time to get the money before they had to pay people. And I know they really rubbed some actors the wrong way.
That's the first I've ever heard about that, to be honest, and I haven't really heard anything about that on the production of this movie. Gotcha. But in our early episodes when we were covering the Salkinds, about their Three Musketeers movie, how they recorded it and it was so long, and they didn't tell the actors that they were going to split it up into two movies. So they had the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers, and the actors didn't even know till they were at the premiere. Mm-hmm. And, at the end of the Three Musketeers, they said, oh, coming next year, it's the next one. So the Salkinds got into trouble with that, and they even called it the Salkin clause, because now in contracts they say you can't like do a sequel and not tell the actors that they're recording two movies.
Well, that's why Richard Lester ended up doing Superman 2 and 3, was because they owed him a movie essentially because of their contracts. And so, I mean, it's one of those. So these guys were notorious, but at the same time, they really did produce some really cool stuff. So
yeah, they were good.
Yeah, this movie is beautiful. If you look at it, especially the North Pole stuff, that was all built as one giant set on an entire soundstage in London at Pinewood Studios, and it was like a 360-degree set that you could like walk through. It's like that would be amazing to see in person.
Mm-hmm. I would have loved that. I mean, just something about it. It feels like so homey and cozy, but also like so grandiose and like mythical. I mean, it's just the set design was like excellent.
Yeah, it was definitely right on point for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like you say, it's like the first half hour, 40 minutes, like this really solid Santa origin story.
Yeah.
Then you get this left-hand turn, and you're in present-day New York. You got John Lithgow. He's like
crazy.
He's like a full-on Looney Tunes villain.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, I often tell John, like whenever we're talking about this, it feels like there were two movies they stitched together. Like there was one storyline where it was like the history of Santa Claus, and then a whole other movie where it was going to be this, the villain of Santa or the villain of Christmas. And then they were like, well, why don't we just plop them together and make one full movie? We have a half of one over here and a half of one over here. Let's just add them together and voila, here's a new movie.
It is funny because when you think of like who a good villain for Santa would be, I mean, you don't necessarily think of like 80s toy tycoon, I mean, it's that's not my first thought. And maybe it's because I'm like a huge comic book Rankin Bass fan, I think more of like Burgermeister Meisterburger or something like that. It's Winterbolt, but it's not necessarily BZ.
And I'm sure we'll get into it, but it's hilarious how the main hero of the movie Santa and the main villain, there's not a single scene of them together facing off or anything.
Yes, it's strange, but I mean, to me it works. But I mean, it is kind of strange. And when you really think about it, it's like, yeah, they probably should have had a scene or two together just to tie it all. But
it's like in our heads, we could picture like, maybe Patch could like like Beezy could like talk his way into the North Pole workshop and like do a hostile takeover or something, something for Santa to do in the second half of this movie. He pretty much just mopes around for the last quarter of the movie.
That's
or
true,
so.
Yeah. Until the very end when it's when it's really exciting and he saves the day. But you're right. I mean, and again, it's the comic book in me, but I just like picture him and BZ as like Professor X and Magneto just talking, playing chess, just talking their philosophies, and he's like, no, we give to the children, and BZ is like, for free. Like I could just see it all play out, and it's awesome in my head.
So I suppose we should dive into it.
Yeah, that's actually what I was about to say. You read my mind. So if we're going to nutshell it, essentially we get Santa Claus's origin, and from there, one of his elves, trying to prove himself after a series of unfortunate events, he joins a business, a toy tycoon, and creates some havoc where Santa Claus wonders if he's even really needed anymore. And of course, thrown in the mix are some children. That's like it in a nutshell, I suppose.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep. That's it.
This is, and I got to say, it's one of the most startling intros and origins of Santa, because, I mean, we see Santa basically like almost freeze to death, like right in the beginning, before he's like officially, the guy. And he's just a nice toy maker who hands out toys to the children in his village, and named Claus, right? That's the name, I believe.
Yes.
It's Claus. Yeah. He just suddenly he gets lost in like a freak snowstorm. And I mean, it really seems like he's going to, I mean, do they perish? Do they actually die? I don't know.
That's a theory. We kind of go along with, yes, they died.
And then come back.
And then they come back. Or, there's kind of two ways. Either they come back, or this is just their afterlife. Like, this is just how they're living their afterlife. So there's two different ways you can look at it. No one really knows.
Yeah.
But it is a pretty daring way to start your Santa Claus movie by having him freeze to death in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. I remember as a kid thinking, but of course I didn't get it. I just thought, they almost froze. Okay, yeah.
That's exactly what we were saying in our podcast.
Yeah. The same thing. When I was a kid, I just thought they fell asleep, and then the elves show up and they're fine.
And the Vendicum, is that
Vendicum?
Vendicum, yeah. Which is, I guess, in their language, I don't even know what language that is, but
nobody knows.
That's what they call them, the little mythical elvish creatures. And they save them and bring them into their workshop, and they start explaining everything to them and showing them around. And it's really cool. I mean, it's like they really build this whole mythology, where not only are they introduced, but then they have like an ancient one that comes in, and there's like a prophecy and all sorts of things. And it's really neat to me to get into that, because I love that kind of world building. That's like one of my favorite things, and that's why I'm so into comics. But I mean, I love how they really take a deep dive into like the mythological aspect of it.
Yeah. And they do it a little bit more there's a novel of the movie as well. And they kind of go into it a little bit more about how the elves originally, they were the ones giving the kids toys. They were hiding them, and only kids could see the elves. And then all of a sudden, the population just kind of grows, and they can't do it safely anymore. They can't give the toys out anymore. So, then the elder, he comes and he's like, don't worry about it. Just, go over there and make your toys. Someone will come someday and will help you. And then they just start making toys, like tons of toys.
Yeah. Which you actually do see when they're showing him his shop, and he's just looking through it, and they're like, yeah, these are for you. And he's like, for me? Like, what do you mean for me? Like, for your children? He's like, no, we don't have children.
We thought that was hilarious. It's like, did they honestly think it's like all like this endless toy tunnel full of toys are just for their kids?
It's like, wow, that's a lot of toys for a kid or two.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes, it's definitely definitely an out there kind of premise. But then they say like one of the most touching things, which is like, no, like all the children in the world are your children now. That kind of a thing. And it's another one of those like I remember sitting in the theater when they said that and just being like, like, wow, I'm Santa Claus's child, kind of a thing. Like it really hit home for my 5-year-old self,
Yeah, it really kind of leads, tells Santa like what his responsibility is. It kind of leads to him like how much this is really going to be for the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really big point.
And do they give us like a time frame of when they were there, like when they first discovered them?
Well, we've been debating that too.
Okay.
They don't pinpoint a certain year. We've been trying to
we've been trying to figure it out.
Determine the timeline. We'd say roughly what 10th century probably.
Yeah, around 10th century is when they start this whole thing. We think that's kind of where we're leading to. So.
Okay. Oh man, that's a long time.
This movie covers a lot of time.
It really does. Yeah.
Really quick.
Yeah, for real. Because like we were saying, after that 30 or 40 minutes, whatever, then all of a sudden we get that shift to the 80s, modern day. But I love how, so they kind of take in their own reindeer, Santa and Anya, his wife, they have their own reindeer, which was Donner and Blitzen. Mm-hmm. Which I guess kind of makes sense in like the whole Santa mythos about, they're like the leaders of the team. Well, of course that would make sense because they're the most used to working with Santa and his wife. So I thought that was a really cool touch. But they take him in and they, try to get him to eat, and Santa's being introduced to some of his elves like Patch and Dooley and some of the other guys. And right away we get Patch's innovative self when he's like, I have a way to, an idea about heating this place with pipes and things like that. It's like that thing that a lot of movies do where like they'll set, it'll be like a period piece, but they try to give them technology that kind of like, negates the fact that they're in that period. Like, and I hate to compare this to, because it's not at the same level, but like Van Helsing, with Hugh Jackman, and where they give him like that Gatling gun style crossbow, and it's like that whole kind of thing. And Patch is really just ahead of his time.
Yeah, it's kind of what they're alluding to. Like he's the one that creates these things, then they kind of they fall out into the real world,
Yeah, which is kind of cool. I mean, when you think about it, to think that, whoa, we have central heating because of one of Santa's elves. So everybody spread that around. No.
The funny thing is, it's amazing how much more is in the novelization of the movie than actually in the movie. And in our podcast, I haven't read the book before, never have. So she's like blowing my mind. Like I have all these questions, like how come this isn't explained? And like, well, in the book, it actually does explain that. It's like, why didn't they put that in the movie?
Do you think maybe that I mean, because I know in novelizations in general, they tend to fill out some of the things, but sometimes they do it from like earlier drafts. Mm-hmm. Well, do you think maybe that was in like an earlier draft of the screenplay that,
Yeah,
that's
at least some of it. Yeah.
That's what we suspect. A lot of it got cut or re-edited because I think they had like, we have to get right through this Santa stuff, and so we get to the New York stuff.
Yeah, which is so funny because to me the Santa stuff is like the most the coolest stuff. Yeah,
it's like I wish they did the whole movie about that. I was like, I'm sure they could come up with some sort of conflict or something.
Oh yeah,
and then at the end he's like, okay, now it's modern day, and then you can go do a whole New York sequel or something.
Mm-hmm. That would have been awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's too bad that David Huddleston passed away because I would have liked a sequel to this. Like something set in 2000s and or even now. I mean, I think it would have been cool, just to see how they've grown and maybe bring back the children as well.
One thing
they would have been Santa.
Another
true nowadays.
Another interesting thing we discovered when we were researching this is that originally the Patch character was going to be a more villainous character, and his name was going to be Scratch. Oh. But Dudley Moore didn't want to play a villain. So that's why we got this nice guy. Originally, he thought, I can run Santa's workshop better than Santa. And that's what leads to the trouble. But because Dudley Moore, the one you paid all this money for, didn't want to be a villain, that's kind of got reworked as what we got in the final product.
Yeah, when your star is, the whole reason you're making the movie is kind of against your plot. Maybe rethink a couple of things here.
Got to tweak it a little bit.
Yeah, just a tad, yeah. But I mean, it's really neat, and we get this kind of competition between it's Patch and is Puffy, right? I think is his name?
Puffy.
Yeah. I love these elf names. What happened to like Bernard and Judy?
Jingle and Jangle.
Jingle and Jangle, exactly. Yeah, I like.
They're later on.
Yeah, it's like we're actually keeping track of elf names. It's like these are the most weird elf names, like Honka and Goober.
Vout.
Oh man, it's funny because like when you think about elf names, especially in like classic like Christmas things, you don't really get very many elf names. So a lot of them are more modern creations, and you see them go all sorts of different ways. So you get the Patch and the Puffy, but like you mentioned, there's also the Jingle and Jangle and all those Kringle, Tanta Kringle, and all that stuff. It's funny to me that there's really no like elf name mythos, I suppose. Oh well. So Patch and Puffy, they're trying to decide who's going to be essentially like in charge, right? And
yeah.
Or at least assist Santa.
An assistant, yeah. That's like, because I guess like you were saying with the spreading population, he's kind of running a little thin, so he's going to have an assistant, and they have this competition, and this is where we get the big, okay, who can make the most toys and all kind of thing. And so Patch, being the innovator and inventor, he has this new assembly line system that looks like it's going to be awesome. But we start to see that his toys are a little bit subpar, even though he produces more, which is kind of defeats the purpose.
Yeah, a lot of, Patch is more of which is, I guess, is very symbolic of the time that we live in, but he's more of a quantity over quality type elf, while Puffy is a quality over quantity elf. It's very, it's kind of a knock on the world, really.
Yeah, and I think throughout the movie it kind of established like, okay, Puffy is like representing like the old traditional ways, while like you said, Patch is the innovator with all these wild ideas.
And it's funny because at least in regards to toy making, it seems like if you could integrate the two, that you'd have like a perfect system, like maybe let him do his thing and then just do like quality control checks after that. I mean, there's got to be a way, right?
And just like in most Santa movies, it's like Santa's just making these wooden toys like right through 1985 when he should be giving out He-Man and Cabbage Patch Kids.
Exactly. Yeah, like kids didn't want like little toy ducks and stuff. No. We want Castle Grayskull.
We want My Little Pony.
Yep.
and then we get this montage of the shoddy toys like falling apart with kids riding them and stuff. That's actually pretty intense. There's a kid that you see screaming what did they show this kid? Because that kid is legit upset when that wagon gets run over by a bus.
He has got to be an A+ actor as an adult, because that was good.
He's probably like an accountant now or something. Right?
Yeah, probably.
It scarred him.
It probably was his wagon that got run over, and he was like, "That was mine."
If anybody knows who that kid is, we'd want to get him on the podcast.
Please call in, yes.
For that minute.
Contact the Santa by the Minute podcast.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of these kids still have to be out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're probably just a little bit older than us. They're about our age. So, but it's funny because I remember when all the toys were falling apart, I was like legit terrified that was going to happen to me, so I was like, no, I got to make sure I'm like super good, so I get like the excellent toy quality, and not really thinking that I don't know, but it scared me.
And then the parents are like just kicking them to the curb and stuff, and it's like, you could probably just easily fix that.
Yeah, it's like, fix that.
It's not like there's computer chips in them or anything, I mean, it's literally like some wood glue could probably do.
All you need is a bolt and a nut, and you're fine.
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah. Oh man. So Patch, he decides to leave. Is that what it is? He kind of like steps down from being.
Yeah, pretty much. Like the remnants of these reject toys start coming back, and this is like the first time in history Santa's ever got returns. So Patch, before Santa can even say anything, Patch like hands over his like assistant apron and puts his little satchel over his back and heads out the door to head out on his own.
That's right. Yeah. He voluntarily gives it up. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and forgot to mention, and this is my fault because I kind of zooming through here, but we forgot to mention that we actually see Santa deliver these toys. So it's like it's kind of like the year prior, essentially, and that's where he meets the little boy. I think his name is Joe, right?
Yeah.
And that's where he meets Joe, and he even lets him. Yeah, and Joe's, of course, is like a homeless, kind of street tough-ish kid, and but he even lets him drive the sleigh, which is kind of cool. I mean, I would have loved that as a kid, and I remember being like so jealous, like, this guy gets to do that, I was like, well, that's not fair.
And also, we have to give a shout out to Henry Mancini's score during, especially that flight through New York scene. It's just amazing music.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the songs that are sung by the choir are pretty forgettable, but that score is just like adds to that magical fantasy feeling that you're talking about. And
I love it because we get that essentially it's like a workshop type theme, but it's like my favorite of the whole movie. It's my favorite. You get that dun 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 dun. I mean, it's so good because it's catchy, but it's also, I mean, it's very Christmassy. It's grandiose, and it fits perfectly. And Henry Mancini, even though he had done a lot, I mean, for me, I knew him most from like the Pink Panther.
Exactly. Yep.
And of course, the not James Gunn. I'm thinking Peter Gunn. I was thinking of Guardians of the Galaxy. The Peter Gunn theme, and I remember playing that in like junior high in band or something. So of course I knew that one, but that's really all I knew him from, even though he had done like all these other scores. And so when I heard him do this, and when I realized years later that it was him doing it, I mean, it was just an extra like, wow, this guy really is good kind of a thing. Yeah, we almost glossed over the kids.
Oh, yeah.
Because we just want to get, okay, now can we talk about John Lithgow?
I know, yeah.
That's the part that's killing us about this podcast. Like, oh man, we're gonna have to wait like a year and a half because we only do a minute a week.
Because he's so good. I mean, it's just he's so good.
It's a shame that he doesn't seem to think highly of this movie. He never talks about it. The AV Club did an interview with him last December, 2019 December, and they brought out some of his lesser known roles, and you could just see him like sort of cringe when they mentioned Santa Claus the movie, and he called it the tackiest movie he's ever been in. So it's
man,
I don't think he's going to be on our show.
It's like a stab to the heart. It's like
a heartbreak.
Because he seems to be having such a good time playing this totally off. I don't want to say off the wall. He's not like wacky Jim Carrey, but he's just like
very animated.
Yes, he's so over the top evil, and he's just loving every second of it. It feels like
it's funny because it's almost like a step down from, and I don't mean that in terms of quality. I mean like in terms of like how zany he is from the role he played as Emilio Lizardo in Buckaroo Banzai. Did y'all ever see Buckaroo Banzai? I mean, it's
not for a while, but
yeah. So he's he plays like this doctor that somehow gets possessed essentially by like an alien, and so I mean that's one of those. He's like off the wall, zany, evil kind of a thing. And this one's like you can see, like if he had pulled back a little bit, like BZ is that, and it's so great, it's so perfect. I mean, his performance, I mean, he's spectacular, but you can see like the seeds between the two, and you're like, oh, okay, I see you. I see you there.
You can also see it like leading up to Third Rock from the Sun.
Rock, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. He knows how to play a good kind of crazy guy.
He can plplay basically any role.
Yeah,
he really can. He's a great actor. Yeah. I love John Lithgow.
So anyway, there's also the little girl Cornelia,
who's
like who spoiler alert, I guess, for a 35-year-old movie, turns out to be BZ's.
People haven't seen this yet.
BZ is her step uncle, which is a very odd relation. Why not just a regular old uncle?
It's very sad to think of like what her life must have led up to for her to be living with her step uncle in New York. You know, like what? So how do you get to that?
I don't know. Well, her parents were deceased, weren't they? Isn't that how? That's why she lives with them.
Yeah.
And I mean, so I guess maybe. Okay.
Was that mentioned in the book? Was that are you gonna?
Yeah.
Oh, it was not mentioned in the movie. I mean, we can
assume it. Yeah.
Yeah.
One funny. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One funny thing, especially when you watch it on Blu-ray or when you saw it in the theater, because there's that big reveal where it's like, oh my gosh, he was Cornelia's step-uncle. But on Blu-ray or in the theater, there's a scene where she first meets Santa in her living room, and you can see like framed pictures of BZ all over the room. But there's that scene where he like turns around in the chair, smoking his cigar, and it's like, she goes, "Merry Christmas, Uncle." Oh, I certainly. I can't do it. Certainly will be. And that was supposed to be like the big reveal, but
he's like all over the house in all of the other shots of her, like just frames of him everywhere.
There's this giant painting. I wonder where it is now of like John Lithgow. It's hung over the fireplace.
If he doesn't like the movie, he probably doesn't have it, which is kind of a shame because I hope so bad that it's in his house somewhere.
Me too.
Maybe he's a closet fan. Like, he just doesn't want anyone to know.
Doesn't want anyone to know, yeah. Losing cred. Yeah. Oh, man. But yeah, so we meet Cornelia. I mean, she's really sweet girl. She even gives Joe some food because she can see that he's, hungry. And so, I mean, it's a really nice moment, character building for her. But I love it because when Santa and Joe are taking their ride, they try to do that super duper looper for the, and I remember thinking it was like the coolest trick ever when I was little. It's basically just a loop-de-loop kind of a thing in the sky. And but I think Donner and Blitzen are always a little skittish when they're doing it.
Yeah, Donner always bails out because he's the skittish reindeer anyway, but he's like afraid of heights. He doesn't really want to be flying.
He doesn't want to be flying at all.
He does not want to be in the air, but he has to be. So he's like, no, I'm not doing that. No way.
Oh, man. Poor Donner. I wonder if there's like, I don't know, some sort of like reindeer whisperer or something. Talk to him afterwards when they get back.
and there's a lot of not so subtle product placement during those New York scenes. Yeah. I think there's an entire minute where Joe is just like has his face pressed up against a McDonald's window while everybody's eating McNuggets and Big Macs and stuff. And Cornelia puts down like a can of Coke, like perfectly visible for him to drink.
Let me read what that says. Well, and it makes sense because, you think of Santa Claus, it's going to be like a holiday movie. You think those are normally really big. And then also the Salkinds, so I mean that.
Finance the movie however they could because it was an independent movie. They had to find investors wherever they could.
Yeah. So hey, we'll put a whole minute of your McDonald's in there. So. But Santa Claus, he delivers all the toys, and then we get what we talked about where they start falling apart, and then that's when Patch leaves, and he ends up going to New York. So it's kind of like Buddy I wonder if he takes the same route as Buddy the Elf.
Maybe.
That's something I've always been curious about too. It's like it had to have taken him a year because he leaves after Christmas when the broken toys come, and then he reemerges in New York City the following Christmas.
Yep, it's just
when all the BZ toys are being pulled off the shelves because that's as a kid when that was a moment as a kid that congressional hearing where they're tearing apart the teddy bears and the glasses falling out.
That was scary.
Yeah.
It's like, what the heck is going on? Especially when you're a kid watching this for the first time. it's like whiplash. It's like you just went from the North Pole and all this whimsy to setting dolls on fire.
Yeah, see, and that's what I'm talking about, that weird tonal shift. It's all of a sudden it's like now this serious thing. And it's funny because now it's because I remember that old Saturday Night Live sketch with Candice Bergen and Dan Aykroyd, where he's like a toy maker and they have like she's trying to call him out. She's like from a parents watchdog type of group. And she's confronting him about his toys, and there's like Johnny Switchblade, and like you press his head, and like little knives, razor blades come out of his arms, and there's one just called Bag of Glass, and it's just a big bag of glass.
Yeah, right from the get-go, they set up BZ as like somebody so crooked and greedy that he'd stuff a teddy bear full of broken glass and nails.
Hey, if it gets the job done,
I guess so.
I guess it's cheaper than cotton. I don't know. Seems like cotton would be a little cheaper to me, but maybe not.
They just sweep up the floor and then put it in the bear.
Yeah, like whatever. Kids won't notice.
They're not playing with the inside.
But Patch sees that all the toys are being like removed, and so he thinks they're like I guess doing really well, and so he goes to see BZ. And convinces him that hey, I can do something really cool here. I mean, it's just funny the way they go about it. It's like he's so naive, which is awesome because that's exactly what you expect from like an elf. It's an ancient being that's been around forever that doesn't really associate with people. But then you also see like BZ's kind of slimeballness. I mean, it's like a great dichotomy there, and Dudley Moore plays it really well too. He's got that innocence in this particular one, which kind of contrasts with some of his other roles, like Arthur we were talking about.
Yeah, you can really see that he's acting well in this movie when you compare him. Like we were talking, I think it was on our podcast. I don't know. Our conversations blend together because we talk about the movie so much. But one of the drawbacks of the movie may have been that Dudley Moore was the main elf. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't expect him to be in a kids movie. You'd expect him to be more in a an older adult, older teen movie, not
comedy,
like a comedy of sorts. But.
Right.
Yeah. And that's another thing. It's like as kids watching this, we didn't really have. I never saw Arthur as a kid or anything. Nope. Dudley Moore was in. This is like a lot of kids' first exposure to Dudley Moore, so we had no like frame of reference to what a Dudley Moore performance would be. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if that's part of the reason it got such bad reviews. Like people going in expecting, Dudley Moore's going to be acting so funny and crazy, but it's very subtle and it's a very different performance from him.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point, because I know the critics were not very nice to the movie. But that makes a lot of sense, especially for adults, because I don't remember if my parents enjoyed it that much, honestly. I know I loved it. I thought it was awesome.
And the other thing that may have sunk it, you have this movie about Santa Claus, and it got a PG rating. And back in 85, PG-13 only been around for, a year at that point. Mm-hmm. So part of our theory is like, a PG rating carried a lot more weight. And then you hear Dudley Moore, who's known for these more adult comedies, is in the Santa Claus movie. And it's like, maybe we're not going to take the kids to this one. We'll wait for the video to come out or whatever. There is a little bit of language in there that got the PG rating. Mm-hmm. Like I don't know if I can say it on the Totally Rad podcast. It's pretty mild in the scheme of things.
Yeah, it really is.
Enough to get a Santa movie. Santa doesn't say anything.
No, Santa doesn't. No,
Santa wouldn't.
No, he doesn't know what those words mean.
Pretty much just BZ.
Yeah, right. Well, BZ. I mean, this dude. But yeah, so Patch decides to help him out, and so he makes the lollipops using some of that magic, reindeer flying food stuff.
Powder.
Yeah, I guess. Dust. I don't know.
It's stardust. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not said in the movie, but it is supposed to be stardust.
Stardust. Oh,
they harvest stardust, and that makes the reindeers fly.
Mm-hmm.
Was that in the novelization or the Marvel comic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was in the novel.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. I'm gonna have to see if I can find it, because I think it would be a great read, honestly.
It is. I've read it a couple times. It's very, very good. Nice. It fills in a lot of plot holes.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of like the Rise of Skywalker novel that filled in a lot of stuff from the movie, and you're just like, oh, okay, well that makes sense now. So Stardust, okay. Because every time I always want to say magic dust, and then of course it reminds me of like that old Cheech and Chong bit. The magic dust, kind of a thing. so that always makes me go off on that tangent there, but that's interesting. Stardust. So he makes these lollipops and it helps kids kind of, levitate and have a good time. And so BZ's pretty much raking it in at this point. And I love that, like, what would you call it? Hovercraft, maybe? The Patch builds. I mean, I wouldn't even know.
Oh, his car, his Patchmobile.
Yeah. Like, I guess it's like a flying. Yeah, I guess it's a hovercraft. I don't know what else I'd call it.
Yeah, kind of like a flying car of some sorts. Yeah.
Yeah, I always liked that. I mean, I just thought it was cool.
Yeah.
So the scheme is like the first taste is free. These lollipops. Because BZ thinks it's going to help clear up his bad reputation by giving out all these free lollipops.
Like good
and they turn out to be a hit. Yep. And then it turns out to be a hit. So his scheme is, okay, we're going to have a sequel. It's going to come out on March 25th. And we're going to do it again. But this time, if you want the magical candy, you're going to have to pay for it.
It's almost like a drug allegory when you think about it.
Yeah.
First one's free, and then now you got to pay for it. I mean, it's crazy. Although I did think it's cool. I'm Catholic, so on March 25th that we celebrate the Feast of the Annunciation, where the angel Gabriel comes and tells Mary that Jesus is going to be born, and that's like 9 months later. Then you get Jesus' birth, which is Christmas. I thought it was kind of cool that they picked March 25th essentially as like, well, we'll take. Not only will we own Christmas, but we're going to own this part too. So it's like this is like his whole plot. I mean, it's just it's neat. But I mean, that's neither here nor there. I just think that's kind of cool.
So the follow-up, he's going to make lollipops, but they're going to
candy canes.
Candy canes. That's right.
Candy canes.
Oh man, I only do a podcast about it. I got my candy cane and my lollipops mixed up. But they're going to increase the dosage of the reindeer stardust, the reindeer corn flakes, as BZ says.
Yes.
Which we end up finding out later makes them like crazy unstable and like super dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Right, because this powder is actually at the North Pole. It's cold. In New York, it gets heated up inside the houses, and boom.
Makes sense.
So whereas the
lollipops
make the kids sort of just hover over the ground, I guess the candy canes make you legit fly, which seems like a worse safety hazard than your glass-filled teddy bear.
Yeah, there's like a whole
kid gets sucked into a jet engine or something.
I mean, that's like crazy dangerous. I mean, I don't know, but they would be bestsellers.
I would not let my son have one.
No, definitely not. My kids would not be eating it. But I mean, I could totally see BZ being like, yeah, let's put them out, whatever. And, I mean, don't they even try to go to like Brazil or something? I mean, they're like, yeah, we'll just go to like some country after.
Yeah.
They discover that they're, kind of dangerous. Like, yeah, whatever. We'll just no extradition over here. Kind of.
We already got the money. We're gonna go to Mexico.
Because apparently these were pre-order type deal. You pre-order the candy canes, and you could only pay in cash. Of course, it's 1985, so you only pay in cash.
But
so
still,
he's getting all the money.
Suspicious to me.
So he and his assistant Towser were going to go off to the Bahamas or Mexico or wherever, while Patch delivers these things and takes the fall for him while they're out of town.
It's by 80s villain standard. That's like pretty genius.
It's pretty smart. I mean,
I got to credit. So this movie actually like made me learn what the word puce means.
Yes.
It's the first time I'd ever heard that, and I was like, what is that? Of course I went to look it up, and it's it's a color, but I mean it's something that I'd never heard before, so I got to give credit to Towser there. But as they're discovering, they're talking about all this, Cornelia overhears them, and Joe, I think Joe's there too, isn't he?
Yeah, because Joe was sick.
Because then he gets he was sick, and she's
and he
taking care of him.
Yeah.
They overhear all this, but they capture him and tie him up, I think.
Yeah, this is like BZ like goes from just kind of sleazy businessman to like full on psychopath.
Straight up villain. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like he like legit's gonna kill this kid. It's like, where'd this come from? Because at this point,
you got to do what you got to do. No, I'm just kidding. It was the 80s. Greed is good.
Because at this point, Joe hadn't even overheard the whole scheme. He just sort of sneezed, and BZ's like, "What the hell's this kid doing in my house?" And as his bodyguard tie him up in like the radiator room, the boiler room of his toy factory, instead of like just shooing the kid out of your house or like calling the cops or something. It's like, we'll go tie him up in our basement somewhere.
Yeah, it's like, put this kid on ice.
Yeah, oh, man. Yeah, he really kind of loses it here.
Yeah.
So that's when Towser fills him in, like, oh, we had these too close to a radiator down at one of our warehouses. Now there's no more warehouse.
Yeah, there's no more warehouse. Yeah, which is a great line. Yeah.
So that's what Cornelia overhears and writes the letter to Santa, who like has had nothing to do for about 40 minutes of this movie now.
No, the only thing he's done is like carve a little statue that kind of looks like Patch.
Yeah.
Yep, and like kind of mope around.
Yeah,
at
that's
the
really
North
all he's
Pole.
done.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, Santa, you
We get it. You're sad. We got it.
But he
it's been like 2 years. Move on.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. But he had given the statue to Joe, and that's how when Patch finds him, that's how they, he finds the statue and realizes, hey, this kind of looks like me, and Santa made it. So I guess he's not mad at me, and I guess he does like me, kind of a thing. So he's like, all right, let's go back to let's go help Santa instead. But by this time, Santa has come and has met with Cornelia, and they realize, hey, there's these candy canes. They're going to blow up. They're unstable. And Patch, by the way, Patch and Joe they kind of have them all in their Patchmobile. And so then they go do the big rescue, which again was like super cool to watch. I remember, and even watching it again was like, wow. And so when I showed my kids, I remember they were just like, their jaws dropped and they were just, enthralled by it. And which is really cool, because I remember being the same way when I watched it, So it
is pretty impressive to watch, but like when you think about did he really even have to do this loop-de-loop to catch him? It's like, couldn't they just like kind of flown underneath and caught him? That wouldn't have been as impressive. But
you're right. They really could have. And I think, because I was trying to figure out like, why did he do that? And I think it's because they couldn't get his attention. So I think they went in front of him first to let him know, like, hey, we're here. And then of course it blew up, and then as they were coming down, they were able to catch him. I think. I don't know. I'm going to go with that, but I don't know if that's right at all.
We're going to have you on for that minute, and we can break it down.
There we go. Yeah. But I mean, it's a really cool sequence, and I'm just like so impressed and amazed that like neither Patch nor Joe were hurt by that explosion. So
Patch did a good job building the car, I mean.
Yep. Yeah, it's like
it fell apart where it should.
Where it crumples in a certain way to protect you. Same thing.
Yep.
So meanwhile, we have to point out that Cornelia has called the police. She even says to Santa, "I called the police. I don't think they believed me," but apparently they did believe.
They did,
her. Yeah. Even though, and they're arresting the bodyguard. They're arresting Towser. BZ looks out the window and then just stuffs his face full of these candy canes, and he thinks he's outsmarted the police.
Which again is like a really macabre thing, because he's just going to float like forever, right? I mean, he's eaten so many at this point that he's going to just keep going higher and higher until he runs out of oxygen, or like burns up in the atmosphere, or worse, like actually makes it to outer space and then basically implodes. I mean,
yeah, that's literally not the imploding part, but that's literally the last shot of the movie. It's like they end it, Cornelia and Joe are up at the North Pole dancing and everything, and then you just see BZ floating helplessly in space for I don't know, until he dies at the end of the Santa Claus movie.
I love how he's yelling, "Get me down!" It's like, who are you yelling to? Nobody can hear you. You are in space.
Nobody can hear you scream.
It's like, well, that's kind of a depressing way to end your Santa Claus movie.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course you don't think about it as a kid.
I know.
And you have to suspend your disbelief, but I mean, like, he's literally going to, like, I mean, his explosive decompression is like going to, this dude is like going to die painfully in a Santa Claus movie.
Because usually in these things, like, the villain sees the error of their ways, you know, like the Bumble and Rudolph, or like the Winter Warlock in the Rankin and Bass one. But here it's like, no, Beasley's just evil from start to finish. Yep. Doesn't even meet Santa, and he floats into outer space.
Oh man, poor guy. I mean, hopefully he comes down and they were able to save him before any major damage was happening, but I doubt it.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Maybe they would have explained it in the sequel. It's like, Beasley's back.
Maybe the Stardust protected him.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe it is Stardust.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But so eventually Santa pretty much like adopts Joe and Cornelia too, or
yeah. Well, yeah, he adopts Joe, and then they say that Cornelia can stay until at least the next Christmas, which is
that's
basically a year away. Not quite, but basically, because this whole exploding car saving Joe thing is only 2 weeks after Christmas, so you know it's basically a year that she's living at the North Pole. Nobody notices she's missing.
Well, I mean, her guardian's gone, so I guess it makes sense. I don't.
Yeah, it's like Santa kind of like straight up kidnaps these kids, if you think about it.
He really does.
Because you think somebody would notice Cornelia's missing, the nanny, you know, her
School,
teachers, her dance recital teacher, you know, somebody might call the cops on this.
And what is she going to say when she gets back? Yeah, I was at the North Pole with Santa. I mean,
right.
That's crazy. Like, they will have her committed, you know?
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of, when you think of like the you know, repercussions of this ending, it's like, oh man, there's some serious things going on here, but
this is the real reason we never got a sequel. Like, where do you go from here?
Santa has to save Cornelia.
They have to go break her out of Leon. Oh man.
Santa gets arrested.
Well, why not? I mean, Santa's been in jail in like so many other movies, you know.
That's true.
And,
Everyone, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, might as well.
Why not?
We didn't mention it earlier, but we got to give a shout out to the people who made those animatronic reindeer. It's like, we've been watching this thing. It's like almost impossible to tell the switch between a real reindeer and a puppet. I mean,
they were really good. Yeah. They really were.
I think they had some former Jim Henson creature shop guys doing these things. It's like, they're so realistic looking. Like, in the same shot, you'll see them switch. If you have to really pay attention for when they switch between the animatronic and the real one.
It's awesome. It's funny because then you think about like other movies where they do like animatronic reindeer or even like CGI reindeer, and they just don't hold up. Like, these ones to me seem the most complete looking, and I mean, they're just the most photorealistic, I think, that I've ever seen.
Even the ones in the Tim Allen movie that were made like a decade after this don't hold up.
No, they really don't. They really don't hold up at all. And especially as the movies progress, they like keep getting worse and worse, which is strange. I guess their budget keeps getting less and less.
The skill set goes away.
So sort of like the Ninja Turtles, where they go from these beautiful Jim Henson puppets to whatever you got by the time they were doing like the rock concerts and stuff. Like, it's just like these cheap looking turtle suits.
Oh yeah, out of our shell. Yeah, that was bad. That was really bad. But oh well. I mean, you know, you gotta take what money you can get, I guess. Oh man, but you know, it was a good movie. I really enjoyed it, and it's a shame that most critics didn't like it, because I think if they had liked it, I mean, not only would it have fared better, but I think we probably could have gotten that those sequels that we were talking about. And I could see the Salkinds doing, whatever they needed to do to get it made.
Yeah, they were definitely hinting at sequels. We've seen stuff from before the movie was released. Like they were like hinting at like a Son of Santa sequel that obviously we never got, because they were obviously setting Joe up to be Santa's son, because a lot of it got cut from the movie, but they really hammer home in the book and in the comic book that Anya and Claus, have never had any kids of their own. They can't have kids of their own. They bring it up over and over, but they really dialed that back a bit in the movie.
Yeah, so it's kind of they adopt Joe, and
I think in the comic book adaptation, which I have read, at the very end, Santa like puts his hand around Joe and says, he calls him son. It's like, my son.
Wow. That's wow. So yeah, he would have been it, wouldn't he?
So maybe he like kind of inherited the Santa empire.
Yeah. Maybe Claus and Anya were like, it's been 5,000 years. Maybe it's your turn.
All right. The time of the Jetsons. Like, finally, I get my shot. That would have been interesting. Or maybe, because they say they're going to live forever, so it's not like they can pass away and pass the mantle. It's just it would have to be just strictly passing the mantle, unless he gets sick or something, or I don't know. But
unless the ancient one has some magic in there that
maybe they're like, I'm done, I'm tired, let's I think it's time to rest, and then Joe steps up. That would have been interesting. And it's definitely in keeping with a lot of adaptations of Santa, like Arthur Christmas, and even now Noel that came out, and where there's a new line, things like that. Although in the Santa Claus, it always did crack me up when Charlie says something like, I'm gonna go into the family business. And it's like, well, that means you got to kill your dad, That's the only way you're gonna take over, is if you put on a suit.
It's surprising how many Santa Claus movies involve death.
Yeah,
exactly. You normally don't think of that. So I have to ask, what would you guys say is your happiest moment with this movie, or memory, anything like that?
Well, happiest memory has to be, you probably have like top 10 John Lithgow moments, because he just totally, just makes you laugh every time. I don't think this movie would be quite as memorable if it wasn't for him, but also David Huddleston just gives that great performance. But do you have any like childhood memories or anything?
I think the part that always stood out to me the most, when I would think about the movie from when I was a kid, was the very beginning of the movie, when they first walk into the elf village and you see the enormous set and all of these elves, and just it like gives me goosebumps thinking about like how awesome it would be to be in there and like have one of their elf beds be my bed. And just be in this huge thing. It's just amazing what they were able to do on that set. And when you're a kid, you don't think it's a set. It's like real life,
it's real. Yeah, exactly.
And I love that part.
Well, yeah, exactly. And for me, it would be seeing that on the big screen, because I remember my dad, taking me to it, and it was just filled with so much wonder and enjoyment. I mean, it was great. So I think that would probably be my happiest moment. But now we come to my favorite part of the show, which is a little segment I like to call Gag Me with a Spoon. So this is where we do our best impression of our least favorite part of the movie, which, if there's a movie that you love, I know it's always hard to pick a least favorite part. And then we put it up to the listeners, and they can vote on who does the best job, and the winner gets a sticker, unless of course I win, in which I get a big fat nothing. So, as the guests, I'll let you guys go first. Just kind of set up the scene for us, and then take it away.
It's like, man, we were talking about this before. It's like, oh man, I can't think of like really anything that I could do an impression of that I actively dislike about the movie. It's like I have some issues, like why Pat decides to leave. He like kind of like Santa didn't really have a chance to get mad or say anything, but Patch is like, oh, he doesn't like me anymore. But like all the impressions I want to do are like, for free? Or Christmas too? Or Santa Claus is finished. Maybe we can do dueling Lithgows instead.
There you go. I like that.
No way.
Yep.
No, maybe between you two, but I cannot compete in the dueling Lithgow. No, not
No,
happening.
you can do it good for free. Do it.
Okay. For free?
Love it. All right, we'll do the dueling Lithgows. My for free, I kind of already did one. So instead, we'll bring it out on March 25th, and we'll call it Christmas 2.
Bravo.
Very good.
Something like that. That's terrible, but
well, now I got to ask, what was what we were going to do an impression of originally?
That's actually what I was going to do. I thought the Christmas 2.
That was your least favorite part.
Well, I just thought it was a little bit corny of a dialogue. So I mean, because again, it was hard to choose. I really couldn't pick, and it was like back and forth between that part or when Joe says, right, and I'm the tooth fairy, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Some of the Joe lines are kind of cheesy.
But,
yeah.
And that Christmas 2, I was like, they couldn't have come up with something else. But
I think that was kind of the point. It's like
exactly.
Easy is so uncreative and greedy that he would just flat out call it Christmas 2.
A sequel.
But like this movie is just impossible to hate. And like it's like it's not perfect by any means. There's stuff you can joke about and stuff like we do on our podcast, but it's just so likable and so sincere.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly. It's got so much heart.
It does.
Like you'd have to be pretty cynical, like to not like it. But I know a lot of people don't. Like search for Santa Claus the movie podcast. It's like all these worst movie ever type things where they're just saying how horrible it is for 45 minutes. But we can't think of a single movie we could talk about 1 minute at a time.
Other than this one.
Yeah, I don't even know if I have one that I can talk about one movie at a time. Well, so I have to ask, G.I. Joe, they taught us that knowing was half the battle. What do you think is the other half?
Don't stuff teddy bears with broken glass and rusty nails.
Yep.
Do you have one?
Oh my gosh. Mine's not funny.
Oh.
That's okay. That's all right.
John's the comedian. So it's take pride in what you do. Don't rush through to make more than what you need. So this is kind of from Patch, like rushing through all those toys. Just he gave himself so much more harm than good by rushing through those when he could have just slowed down just a little bit and made sure everything was right.
Yeah, that's good. That's better than mine. Mine is so if knowing's half the battle, the other half is double checking that your magic candy canes won't blow up. It's always a good thing to check. Yeah. But now we're going to use our gift of flight and go chat with the littles. Welcome to another edition of Chatting with the Littles. I'm here with little number 1, my 8-year-old daughter.
Hello.
And we're here to talk about Santa Claus. So, why is Santa Claus your favorite?
Because he brings his presents and the people with no homes and no money that they won't have enough money to buy some toys.
It's true. He is very generous, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was Daddy's favorite saint. St. Nicholas was Daddy's favorite saint growing up.
And he brings us presents in our shoes. I hope I better clean mine.
Yep, and on that note, I think we're going to return to our regularly scheduled program. All right, so John, Ben, what do you want to plug?
Well, we have to plug our podcast. We gave you a nutshell version of Santa Claus the movie here.
Yes,
but if you really want to take a deep dive, go check out Santa by the Minute. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Play, and Podbean. we're about 20 minutes into the movie so far. We post a new episode every Wednesday. And just by watching it, you wouldn't think there'd be something to talk about every minute, but we find multiple things.
We often surprise ourselves with what we see.
Yeah, definitely you should check it out. It's a lot of fun, and you learn so much. It's so cool. Yeah, I highly recommend check out Santa by the Minute for sure. Guys, it's been a blast talking with you. I've had a lot of fun. And I mean, thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for having us. This has been a lot of fun.
Blast. We don't get to talk about it with other people very often. So hopefully you'll come on to our show. We'll pick a minute. If you have a favorite minute, let us know. When we get close to it, we'll shoot you a tweet or something.
Sounds good. Yeah, for sure. Anytime. On that note, I will end it by saying, the prophecy has come to pass that there would come to us a chosen one, and that he, having no child of his own, would love all children everywhere, and that he himself would be an artisan and a craftsman and a skilled maker of toys. And now, chosen one, check us out on our social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you're feeling as generous as Patch, leave us a review on iTunes. Not only does it help us reach more people, but you also get a free sticker. So don't forget to vote, guys. Later, dudes. What did you want to say?
Challenge time.
Challenge time? What kind of challenge do you want to give today?
Make your own little Santa action figure.
Wow, that's very involved. You got to sculpt it or whittle it or everything.
I already made mine with some duct tape and an old magnet that broke that has Santa Claus's face and some, I don't know what they're called, but they're for your ears to get out earwax.
Q-tips?
Yeah.
All right, you heard it here.
And he lost a leg. Santa. My little toy I made.
You heard it here first, folks. Your challenge this week is to make a little Santa Claus action figure. And on that note, we're going to say...
Later, dudes.